Good morning. Okay. When I was asked to write a story about Danny's life, I thought, where do I even begin? Since I only have about 10 minutes, I'm going to have to fast forward to when he was in high school. Danny had the ability to be in many different activities like football, choir, school musicals, Young and Alive, and the assistant warrior chief. But this is what made him him. He had so many interests, but at the same time, he was able to be friends with so many people. One thing we have heard about a lot over the years was how kind Danny was, because he didn't care what group you belonged to, he saw you for you. He had a huge heart and brought a lot of joy and happiness to many people. Danny went to school for the social aspect, so we knew that going to college after high school was out of the question. The events that occurred on September 11, 2001 sealed the deal for what his career choice would be. He was joining the Marines. Of course, my family wanted him to change his mind or to even look around at other options, but he wanted to be a part of what was considered the best of the best. He specifically wanted to wait until his 18th birthday to sign himself up. He took a lot of pride in signing his name on that paper. In June of 2003, Danny stood with 9 other men on the West Branch Auditorium stage. They were announced as the group that would be going into the Marines. This group almost set a record in Ohio for having the most people sign up in one graduating class. You should have seen Danny. That day he stood a little taller. As the tears ran down my face, I stood along with the rest of the auditorium as we gave him a standing ovation. That sure was something to see. At the end of July, a lot of my family went to send Danny off at the MEPS building. We all said our goodbyes, gave lots of hugs, shed many tears, and watched as Danny boarded the bus with just his address book and the clothes on his back. We knew we wouldn't see that big grin or get a big hug for the next 13 weeks. The next 13 weeks were filled with letters back and forth. I wrote to him about the frustrations of high school, and he wrote back about how much he hated being in boot camp. I remember in one of those letters that Danny said he loved me. Now you have to realize we had the typical older brother, younger sister relationship. We fought constantly and said terrible things to each other. He acted like I was the most annoying thing to him. But deep down I knew that he would be there for me in a second. He wouldn't admit that, but I just knew. I feel that him going to boot camp is what really changed our relationship for the better. October 2003, my family and I were at Paris Island watching Danny graduate. I couldn't wait for that person to stop speaking so that we could run on the parade deck and hug him for the first time in what felt like forever. The transformation that Danny made while in boot camp was amazing. We thought he stood tall that day in the auditorium, but the way he stood now doesn't even compare. He wasn't a boy or a young man anymore, he was a United States Marine. His leave went by quickly, and then he was off to Virginia to train for his MOS. He was going to be a golf fuel specialist, someone who was in charge of fueling airplanes. While he was there, he did what every young military guy does, get some tattoos. He got a couple spur-of-the-moment ones, but then he got one that he put a lot of time and thought into. He asked my dad and stepmom for some help in finding a memory verse in the book of Daniel that depicted a Marine. They looked for quite some time, and eventually they found one that Danny liked. It was Daniel 10:6, which reads, "His body was like chrysolite, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and his voice like the sound of a multitude." In no time, this was tattooed on his left arm. After Virginia, Danny was stationed in Cherry Point, North Carolina. While he was there, he made some great friends and was having the time of his life. We think Danny visited the beach and hung out with girls more than he worked, but he was doing what he had always done, living his life to the fullest. My mom was worried about him and his ability to save money, but he never worried about any of this. He had the mentality that would always work out somehow. He lived to enjoy life. After a little while of being at Cherry Point, offers of going overseas to fight in the war started coming up. Danny volunteered the first time, but he wasn't picked. The ones who ended up getting picked didn't volunteer. He thought he got smarter because the second time he didn't volunteer when they asked, but again, he still didn't get picked. He volunteered a third time in the late summer of 2005, and as the saying goes, the third time is a charm. Danny got his wish and his orders. He was to leave in February to help with the war in Iraq. I remember getting a phone call while I was at soccer camp. I remember saying to him that he needed to tell them he couldn't go anymore because he wasn't allowed because I said so. He said with a confident voice that this was something he had to do. Just when you get prepared for your brother to leave in 6 months, you get a phone call in the middle of the week saying that if we wanted to say our goodbyes to him that we had to come down that weekend because he was leaving on Sunday. Sunday comes and we are all in the lobby saying our goodbyes to him.
But he's so strong that he keeps saying, I will see you later, never goodbye. We were all scared for him, but he never acted scared. 13 days after getting his orders to leave in February, he leaves us in that lobby of the hotel. It was Danny's wishes to have his belongings from the base taken home. He could have left them at Cherry Point, but he was adamant about us taking it back with us. It was hard to focus on daily life when you had no idea how Danny was doing. He would call occasionally, but it would be so early in the morning I was half out of it, so I just listened to his voice as him and Mom talked on the phone. We sent boxes to him to give him a piece of home. We did whatever we could because not only was it helping him, it was helping us too. We knew that Danny wasn't doing the safest job over there. He was in the 2nd Combat Security Detachment and he was conducting surveillance while driving Humvee in a convoy. In one email, Danny mentioned that he was able to make the Humvee do donuts in the sand. That sounded like the Danny we knew, and that made us feel a little better about him being over there. Excuse me. One email he sent us stands out the most. It stated, and this was sent on October 2nd, 2005. I need a tissue. Hey all, this email is to let you know what is kind of going to happen. We have a big operation about to go in a few days, Operation River Run or something like that. We were told pretty vague things, but in a town of Editha, and it's going to take up a lot of this month. So you may not hear from me, but mail will still work the same, so don't think your stuff won't get to me. Also, you won't need to worry, because if something, in capital letters, which it won't, were to happen, you all would be notified. My squad has a theme song, Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi, but we're all good and ready, so I love you all. Dan. Danny never talked like this. He never hinted that anything could ever be wrong. It was weird and it followed with an uneasy feeling. 4 days later, my mom and I were watching the news because a big group of military men and women had just arrived at the Akron-Canton airport. We both said we couldn't wait until we could go watch Danny do that. Mom left for work and I continued to get ready for school. And as I was getting ready, I heard a knock at the door. My heart stopped because I was home alone and it was early in the morning. My mind went immediately to someone who was going to break into the house. I tried to ignore it and remained really quiet, but the knocks continued. And after about 15 minutes, I figured that if they hadn't busted their way in by now, they must not want to. I walk out into the kitchen and standing at the screen door, I see 2 Marines dressed in uniform. My heart sinks. I open the door and they ask for my mom. I tell them that she left for work and they reply that they can't say anything else until they speak to my mom. I started to cry and I told them that I already knew exactly why they were standing there. What felt like an eternity to me, and many phone calls later, I was able to track my mom down and get her to come home. When she arrived, my dad, my stepmom, and my stepbrother were there too. We were all in the kitchen as the one Marine proceeded to tell us that the Humvee Danny was driving went over an IED and he was killed by the explosion on October 6, 2005. I think I went into autopilot after that conversation. I don't remember what I did, but before I knew it, it was the calling hours. Hundreds and hundreds of people came to show their respects for Danny. So many with wonderful stories about how he touched their lives and what they loved most about him. On October 17th was his funeral. It was a beautiful fall day. After the funeral, on the way to the cemetery, we had to drive down Union Avenue and turn left on State Street. The amount of people that stood on Union Avenue and then on State Street was amazing. Everyone stopped to pay their respects to my brother. They stood by the road and they held their homemade signs and their little flags. Businesses had sayings on their billboards about Danny being their hero or God bless Danny. Alliance Police Department had a cruiser at every intersection blocking traffic for the funeral procession. The Alliance Fire Department hoisted 2 of their ladders in the air and draped an American flag off of it. The support was overwhelming, but it was awesome at the same time. It was the first time I realized what kind of an impact my brother made on a community that barely even knew who he was. What's strange is that Danny had mentioned when he'd come home, he would get a parade, and he definitely got his parade that day. As time went on, we started to realize that someone with a much higher power was in control of Danny's life. We got this sense of feeling that he knew too. First, he got his tattoo. Dan is 10-6, and he died on October 6, which is 10-6. Second, he wanted his belongings home, not left at Cherry Point. Third, he was a part of a division known as the Guardians, which their saying was "follow me." Fourth, he sent that email explaining what would happen if something bad happened to him. As much as we wanted to, we couldn't be mad because Danny was obviously put on this earth for a specific reason, and he fulfilled that purpose with honor and integrity. You can't return to normal after something like this, so we had to find a new normal. The first year that Danny was gone was tough. The first holidays missed, his first birthday missed, and the first anniversary